Hi, Travis. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Bye.
Good movie. What's up?
Those of you, okay, I've got all kinds of things. Okay, there we go. All right, let's start over. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, those of you that are here in person, those of you that are watching us live, and those of you that will watch us later by recording, to the last board meeting of the 24-25 school year. So we're coming to the end with school field trips and projects, and then obviously all this week, graduations, and ultimately the last graduation on Sunday. So thank you, everyone. Shirley, can we be called to order, please, with the roll call? All right. Sheila.
Troy Carr,
Yes, here.
Jamie Clapham,
Here.
Christine Stephenson,
Here.
Donna Moore is absent with notice. Michael Berkman,
Here.
Walt Swan is absent with notice, and Katie Urban. Here.
All right, may I ask everyone in attendance to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberties and justice for all. Right. Before we take a motion to approve the proposed agenda, we are going to be deleting items 4B and 4C. 4B and 4C will be deleted for tonight. All right, with that edit, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agenda with deleting 4B and 4C.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, please say no. All right, at this time, we have open forum and we have one person that's willing to speak for 5.
President Carr.
Sharing the success. All right, let's move faster than.
All right. Thank you, President Carr. Yes, we were hoping to recognize Jesse Coy and Jordan Bauer this evening. Unfortunately, things come up and we weren't able to do that. But that said, still excited for their accomplishments and achievements. But we do have one yet we want to recognize. So I'm going to ask Matt McCormick to come up and lead that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Whoa. I'll just hold it. My name is Matt McCormick, and I'm a board member for the Rapid City Public School Foundation. And I had the honor and the privilege this year to chair the Teacher of the Year Committee. And we had all 22 schools, the Rapid City area schools, participating in the program. Our committee uses the state of South Dakota rubric when identifying our district's Teacher of the Year. From the application process, we narrow these 22 candidates down to 10. These 10 candidates are then interviewed by a committee comprised of foundation board members and members of the community at large. This year's Teacher of the Year blew our committee away with his unique answers to our interview questions. When asked what he wants the community to know about his students, he said, "We are in good hands." He went on to say, "We are in good hands due to the incredible students of our district, that they will be able to solve the problems my generation leaves behind, and that they will have the intelligence and the critical thinking skills to overcome these challenges and make the world a better place for all." I'd like to introduce to you this year's Teacher of the Year, Ross Hunter.
Thank you. Just as a teacher of 12 years, we have great students. Not only, I'm also married to a alumni of Stevens High School. We do have amazing students who do really great things. I guess if you were at the Evening Events Excellence, just tremendous kids. Also too, as somebody who's been in a lot of schools throughout this country, Rapid City School Districts have tremendous teachers. And, Teacher of the Year, you could pretty much go to any school in this district in the 22 and pick 2 or 3 people that are so much more deserving of that honor. So as a parent of 4 children who go to the schools here, I'm tremendously blown away by all the teachers that this district has that go above and beyond. So thank you. And as I say that, I have to head out to a middle school dance. So wish me luck.
All right, thank you very much. Any board members, any comments? Oh, Mrs. Clapham.
I just wanted to say, thank you to Mr. Hunter for welcoming me to his class. Several weeks ago, I sort of snuck in the side door, and it was just really enjoyable to see just his absolute passion, for teaching and knowing, that Mr. Hunter hasn't always been a teacher, and that I do believe it is a calling, and it is clear that it is his calling, and I am so glad we have you, and I hope we get to keep you for a long time.
Right, thank you. Mrs. Urban.
So I got to be on the selection committee, which was pretty great experience. And I'm just so grateful for your words because I think they're positive, and I just feel like, at least right now, for whatever reason, I'm just hearing so much negative, and I think people forget that there is so much great in our district, and we have, like you said, incredible teachers, and you were a great pick, so thanks for all you do.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure there have been. Okay. All right. This time, one person for open forum. Mrs. Thompson, you have 5 minutes.
There we go. Okay. My name is Florence Thompson. I'm president of South Dakota Parents Involved in Education. And I'm also a retired school psychologist with over 40 years' experience in the schools. I just have a short one tonight. I want to remind people that there is an election going on and there is a school board election. And a lot of people just unfortunately don't pay much attention to school board elections, but they're very important. So I urge everyone to find out if you have a school board election in your area. And if you do, to get informed about the candidates. It's very important that people get informed and vote in school board elections. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Board response to open forum. Mrs. Clapham.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. That is really good to highlight. Sioux Falls just had their election and they had 2% voter turnout, just which tells you how low the awareness is of school board elections, yet they are very important. Yes, early voting has started, but thank you for bringing attention to that. Like I said, they're seeing statewide, nationwide, voter turnout is very low, so encouraging people to vote is really important. Thank you for highlighting that.
All right. Anybody else? All right, I don't see any hands. At this time, Dr. Strasser for acting superintendent report.
Good evening, board. A few things to bring to your attention tonight. Obviously, we have a lot of things going on at the end of the year. There's honoring ceremonies, of course, the big one with graduation and just finishing up the school year. There's always a lot of activity and excitement as we transition from the end into summer. One of the unique programs that has changed, Dr. Conroy, in his work over at RCAA, has created our district as a GED testing site. So we're really excited to offer that service in our district, so students don't have to go out to take the GED test. So he's had made some great strides there already in supporting students, and we've had some students complete their GED test. I believe he had 7 in a 2-week window. So some really good things there. We've got, well, let's see. We've got some survey results that I wanted to share with you tonight. And you can see the student experience survey that was posted on the agenda. But I want to show a presentation a little more formal here. Okay, just give me a moment to figure out how to share this appropriately. So I can just highlight a few key items coming from our student experience survey. The data, of course, comes from what you were able to review. On the survey metrics, I thought this was a good way to represent the top box. So the top box is those scoring at 5s, and the top 2 is the 4s and the 5s. And you can see from 24 to 25 that we've made increases. What this shows you is participation overall improvement. And one of the downsides of this year's survey is the decrease in participants. And that's something obviously we want to change as we move into next year. But regardless of that, students are showing more positive comments overall, and despite that lower participation. So you can see the increases here. When you look at our net promoter score breakdown, we always want to see more promoters, and that changes our passes and detractors. So that's actually what we want, even though it might look a little different. So I think when you look at an interpretation, students are increasingly likely to recommend their school based on just overall net promoter score, and just really pleased with the increases that we're seeing there. Trying to bring some themes to this a little bit. The instructional engagement side, questions 11, 13, and 19, just showing that, question 11, I set learning goals, track my progress. 13, teachers ask me how I learn best. Question 19, I regularly receive feedback from my teachers. So really kind of bringing this around instructional engagement and showing that our top box was increasing. And those are significant when you look at the mean score, 0.25, like on question 13, that's a huge gain. So making progress there. And you could summarize it as instruction is becoming more personalized and feedback driven. Another theme that came out of this, looking at belonging and enjoyment, question 17, 16, 15, did that a little backwards, but feeling of belonging at school, I like going to school, and respect amongst kids at school. So you could see the increases there, even though question 15 around respect, a little bit smaller. I think that's a tough one to quantify and for kids to respond at the top box level. But belonging's improving, and peer respect, of course, is a challenge and something we're always working on. The two areas that showed slight declines, and by slight, we're talking 0.01 and 0.02. So, but safety on the bus, and specifically that's geared towards kids that ride the bus, and then cleanliness. So, yeah, those are considerations for us to always be mindful of. And just some next steps as we come out of the student survey, and then this is the last of our surveys this year. But we always want to celebrate leadership, care, and engagement. I think were things that were highlights of the survey. Addressing challenges in peer respect, school cleanliness, I think are things that we can learn from this. Continuing to center on student voice in our planning, being able to be responsive to what our students are telling us. And that's leads into the fourth bullet, ensuring students see their feedback and how that leads to action. So we do intentional communication with kids, our principals do, and then they do a rollout of that, very similar to what they do with the other two major surveys around parent caregiver engagement and the employee experience. So the process is very similar, and we want to learn and turn that feedback into action. And you see, oftentimes these are reflected in our school improvement plans that are being developed and finalized here in the next week or so. And then, of course, our goal is to increase participation to all students, or to get participation from all students. And this was a good conversation that I had with our principals last week at our principal meeting, in how we really need to go about doing that. And in in a district that takes an opt-in approach, we talked about, well, how do we need to change our focus and mentality and just offering this as a district survey to our students. So that's what we're looking at doing as we move into next year. So that's my report for tonight, and respond to any questions that you may have.
All right, Mrs. Urban.
Was it just high school students that took this?
This is grades 2 through 12.
Okay. Just one piece of feedback. We had the community outreach held a listening session with AP students over at Central, and we asked about this survey, and a lot of them didn't know about it. And so we were kind of talking about it, and I think the suggestion came up that maybe they could do it like as part of grad time, so that it's in the class and they're all participating versus if you got it in an email, it sounds like a lot of them don't check their email. So it just might be more effective to say, we're going to do it at this time in this class. I think we get more people. Thanks.
Mrs. Stephenson.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what the percentage of elementary, high school, middle school that responded.
I don't have the percentages. It was significantly more elementary, middle results more that way versus high school. Our high school numbers were down year over year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they didn't even start that high to begin with. Did they? I mean, not.
Yeah, we did increase our numbers at Central year over year. Stevens was down year over year.
Yeah. This is kind of just a question. You said the survey shows that students feel they're getting more personalized education and feedback driven. When you see that result, are you like, yes, because we did this and this year? Or does it feel a little bit more like, I don't know, like, well, that's a random result. Do you feel like there was something that happened in the district this year to encourage more personalized and feedback driven learning?
I think those comments and how kids respond are outcomes from how they feel about responding to their teachers and their principals. The question about principals scored really high, which is great. So I think whatever they're doing in their buildings to help kids feel good about being in school is making a difference. It does make me go, yeah, what are those things? I haven't drilled down on what that might be because, I don't think we did anything in particular to directly impact. I think to me, it's the adults in the building showing they care about kids. And that was just a positive this year.
Did you see anything where it was like, ooh, this school right here made huge gains? What did they do and how can we share that or spread that?
Yeah, I think we can always break that down. We haven't sat down and talked about it that way. It's because results vary so much from building to building. I think that's a hard district-wide, that's hard to assess. I think it's more valuable for our principals to work with their students and then their teachers on how do we take what they told us specifically here and turn that into actionable items. So until we get better results across the district, I think that's hard to pinpoint and analyze.
Yeah, I guess I would just push back a little bit to say, well, if there's a school, we're always looking for growth. And if there's a school that showed a lot of growth, it'd be interesting to find out what happened and how we can share that.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Schaefer, I see your hand is up.
Can I just note about participation? Because I was the one who sent the survey. This year compared to last year, parents did have to opt their student into taking the survey. So last year we were able to send out 3rd through 12 fully, and we only sent the survey out to about 5,000 kids this year. So I think that's very important to note for participation numbers.
Okay. So then how with Mrs. Urban's idea of having them do it in class, we couldn't do that.
You can do it that way, but you're only giving it to certain kids in that class who opted in. It becomes very challenging to administer across your school. So, because you have to be responsive to those that opted in and those that didn't. And that's the challenge we have with any survey, that the district doesn't say, this is what we do. Yeah.
Okay.
But is there a potential argument that because this is an internal survey, the opt-in rule doesn't apply? And we can just send it to all the students?
That's how we would like to move, yes.
And we think that's within the realm of what state law allows? Or we're
We-
gonna look into it?
We will examine that and make sure we're in compliance there, but yes.
It does seem like most of the surveys that people get worked up about are the external ones.
Right. And this survey is consistent year over year. So there's no, I mean, the questions are all right here. There's nothing new or fancy about it. And I think it does give us, good information on how we're moving in each of the areas, whether it's parents or whether it's students, and things that we can move on, so.
Mrs. Urban?
Do we have any idea how many kids opt out, like a percentage? It seems like it'd be
It's
few.
it's pretty, I don't have that number.
Yeah, that don't want it.
So this district, you have to opt in. So it's a question during registration that parents have to sign off on whatever surveys for the year, versus an opt out where then they would have to go in and opt their student out. It's all in the registration process, so it's a little easier to skip and opt out technically versus opting in.
So we don't know, we just don't know how many have opted in, like right off the top of our head, which is
No.
fine. But I was just curious if there was more that opt in than don't, or whatever that looks like.
But Bobby, you sent 5,000 emails, so is it reasonable to infer that 5,000 out of 12,000?
Yeah, yep, roughly. I don't know the exact number,
But
but I
somewhere
know,
around
yep,
there.
yes.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments, questions for Dr. Strasser? All right, sir, thank you very much. Very good report. At this time, we'll have our Chief Financial Operations Officer, Mr. Sassy.
Thank you very much, President Carr. Get my slides going. So board, tonight I'm going to take my time to discuss the fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget. Just as a reminder or info, if you have not been through this process before, in terms of the timeline of the budget, schools in South Dakota are required to pass a preliminary budget at a regular meeting in May. They then have technically until October 1st to pass a final. We've traditionally passed our final budget as old business on the annual meeting. So we would have from now until that point to make adjustments to the budget, fine tune it, and bring it back for final approval. So that's kind of where we're at in the timeline. Again, this is a preliminary budget. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things I anticipate that will change between preliminary and final. But ultimately, the good news is I think all of the discussions that we've had leading up to this preliminary budget have been super accurate in terms of where we thought things were going to be, especially in regard to the negotiations process and the outcome of those. So I think it's been great that we've had the opportunity during these reports to be able to deep dive into the funds and some of the impacts and the things that we're seeing that play a major factor in our budget. So I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly and leave some time for questions and discussion. Again, hopefully none of this feels like a shocker or taking anyone off of guard, because we've talked about a lot of this coming into these discussions. So with that, let's get moving. These first few slides are some of the common indicator points that we look at year over year that have a major impact in terms of how the budget is shaped and what it looks like from a year-to-year perspective. So of course, property valuation is a very big deal for districts. really shapes a significant part of the overall revenue, as you'll see here when we dive into the revenue numbers. In 2024, district property valuation increased 10% to 13.68 billion. So again, really aggressive growth, obviously a little under what we saw in 22 and 23, but again, much higher than what we've seen in the front end of that graph. So another significant year in terms of overall property valuation increase. We'll talk more about this as we dig into capital outlay, but I think important to note, as opposed to the last 2 years, 22 and 23, where we saw those really significant increases that were primarily driven by existing properties. So valuation increases happening to existing properties. In 24, we see that sort of take a reverse, where we're seeing a much higher increase in what we would call new property. As we look at the capital outlay revenue growth, we see about a 6.5% increase in growth in that formula, 6.5%, excuse me. So we're seeing more growth this in the tax 24, pay 25 year than we saw in the previous 2 years, where that increase was really driven by existing property valuation increases. But in any case, significant overall valuation increase. Yes, please.
I think, so a lot of people will see that 10%, and think that means that we have 10% more in our budget. Can you just kind of explain why that's not the case?
Yes, absolutely. Two major reasons. First is, without getting too deep into the rabbit hole, the complex interaction between property tax, state aid, and enrollment. And again, what we've seen play out over the last several years, and that we're going to see play out again in next year's budget, is an increase in property valuation, a decrease in enrollment, which really leads to stagnated overall revenue. You're going to see that in the general fund. And again, essentially what we have happening then is a tilt that continues to increase between the burden taken over by our local taxpayers versus the burden on the state in terms of state aid. And so that'll grow again. You'll see that here in a moment. And overall revenue stays flat. So unfortunately, we don't see technically an overall increase in revenue, even though our local taxpayers are bearing a higher burden of the cost of the educational system. The second reason also is, and this gets really deep, I won't talk a ton about it, is again, we're because of the way that our fiscal year is structured, we're smushing two property tax years together. And so what happens on each side of those has an impact in the overall growth, the overall revenue increase. And so again, I won't dive deeply into that. That's very confusing, but those two tax years, 23 and 24, are very, very different in terms of how they played out, where the growth was happening, in the changes in the levies, and ultimately what that means to revenue. So yeah, that's a great point, Katie.
I'm guessing then, I think the next logical question is, well, then the state should have more money because they're not giving it to us. Our local taxpayers are paying it. So I'm guessing you don't know the answer to this, but where does it go?
I will disclaim this with, I'm not an expert in the state's budgeting mechanisms. However, much like us, the state is looking into the future and saying, this is what we anticipate enrollment to be. So we're going to need to earmark X for state aid, whatever that X number is. They then go through, have actual counts, and then reconcile similarly to what they're doing in our process in terms of passing state aid. So when we have an excess of revenue in the general fund, that money is then essentially kept in the general fund and used for whatever purpose the general fund determines it's necessary for. It's my belief that it's happening the same way at the state level. So if if they budget, for example, $500 million in state aid, and at the end of the day, 450 million is what is necessary for the budget, then they have 50 million sitting in the budget. That's my belief. Again, asterisk, I'm not an expert in that. Enrollment trends. So obviously enrollment is massive in terms of how it shapes the district's overall revenue. We talked about this quite a lot. Two different aspects of enrollment here. The first being the blue line, which is the actual funding count from the state in that particular year. So again, in the fall of 24, that count was 12,197. The orange line being the actual physical bodies enrolled in our system at that same time. So we had 12,338 students enrolled. So there was 12,338 bodies on that same day in September that the state aid count happened. What the difference between the two numbers is essentially the ADM of that. So they're taking those bodies times the overall ADM amount and coming out with that number. So that's why we see a slight discrepancy in that number. Again, from a year-to-year perspective, we had another decrease in enrollment. As we'll talk about here momentarily, actually, I'm going to skip that part. Any questions on that? Okay. This is kind of a confusing slide. This was historically something that the district looked at. It's very busy. I keep it because of the fact that I think it's important to point out how this is an expression of how our system has changed in terms of the state's overall burden in terms of funding the general fund. So the blue line is the overall student allocation. So early in that formula, you'll see like 14, 15, 16, and then 17, the state was still using a per student allocation to determine state aid. Post 17, it then went to the new state aid formula, which does not use a per student allocation. However, if you reverse engineer that, so essentially taking overall amount of state aid dividing by students, you can still get a per student allocation, which is what is depicted post 17. And you can see that continues to go down and down and down in terms of the actual amount of state aid that we're receiving per student. The orange bar then is the general fund revenue per student. So overall revenue in the general fund per student. So again, you can see early on in this graph that the state allocation was making up a significant percentage of the overall general fund revenue. Over time, that fell and fell and fell. The general fund, the gray bar is the general fund expenditures by student. And you can see, obviously, that's steadily increased over time. So I include this just to depict the idea that what we've seen happen, in this stands true on the revenue side and plays out on the expenditure side, is that state aid continues to take a smaller and smaller amount of the overall burden of providing services, especially in the general fund.
So just making sure I'm
Yes.
clarifying this.
Please,
confusing.
it's busy.
Yes, so it's saying that the gray is the district's general fund expenditure.
Yes, ma'am.
Overall per student.
Yes, ma'am.
And
That's
so the blue is what the state is contributing basically per student.
Correct. Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So essentially, blue bar pushes down, state aid. Orange bar pushes up, tax, primarily on your local taxpayer. And so again, we see that same tilt happening on the revenue side that's playing out on the expenditure side.
So just to put a bow on it, we aren't getting a 10% increase this year.
That's correct.
People ask all the time, constituents ask me, well, where's all my property tax money going? Because my property taxes have gone up. The reality is we've probably seen some benefit, a little bit of that, but ultimately they're just covering more of our budget and the state is covering less.
Accurate. Well said. Great segue. So, Great segue in one more slide. So always talk about capital outlay flexibility. I think it's important to point out this is what has been budgeted during this time period that this graph depicts, not technically what's used. We have not used capital outlay flexibility since 2020. However, you can see that 2022. You can see that we had that budgeted over that period of years. Obviously, that fell dramatically in 24. 25, we do not have flexibility budgeted, nor will we need it. And then 26, we're not projecting any flexibility necessary either. So I like to show that just to show that we're working away from reliance on capital outlay as well. Okay, now good segue into, nope, still not, sorry. At some point, we're gonna get there, Katie.
Coy?
Yes, sir.
I think that we kind of said that too quick.
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about a budgeting standpoint.
Yeah.
So what that really means is we haven't had to draw out of our capital outlay, which usually is not a good thing because then there's a deficit in the general fund. And I just would like to applaud you that to your work and your team's work is why that has happened. That just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
It's not an accident.
Yeah.
And so I want the community to know that that's a big deal, that we have not had to draw to fund the general fund from the capital outlay.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, sir. That's a good way of saying it. Appreciate it. You're exactly right. I think, again, the idea of moving away from any type of reliance on capital outlay, helping the general fund stand on its own, pushes resources back into capital outlay that are necessary for a lot of other needs. So it's a good trend. Absolutely. So this is a look at the overall preliminary budget for fiscal year 26 versus fiscal year 25, our current fiscal year. So 26 here in the blue column, 25 in the green column. This is tricky because it's always tough to compare a preliminary budget to what's happening in the current year because so much of it depends on at what point of the year you're looking at in terms of the previous year. Obviously, there's amendments happening throughout the year that are changing the structure of the budget. So some of this is very, very deceiving, and we'll talk more about that. But just to point out a few things, as you can see, the general fund, we're projecting a decrease of about 4.3 million. We're going to talk a lot more about that here momentarily, so I won't take a lot of time explaining that. Capital outlay, a significant decrease of 15 million. I'll just put out there right away, that's due to the South Middle School project running out of capital outlay. That was artificially increasing what the expenditures look like. So that's the reason for that major decline. And then special ed increasing about 2.3 million. So those are the major highlights from a year-to-year perspective. This slide shows the projected revenue versus the projected expenditures for fiscal year 26 preliminary. What I've done with this is removed any type of contingency and or outside of a fund or inside of fund transfer to cover gaps. And I'll talk more about what I mean here in a moment. But if you look at general fund revenue, 103 million, general fund expenditures about 105.9 for leading to a $2.8 million deficit. We're going to talk a lot about that. Capital outlay, a significant surplus at this point of about 7.2 million. And then special education, a deficit of 6.7 million. So we're going to talk more about each of those, but those were the revenue versus expenditure numbers in the preliminary portion. Okay, so again, overall budget summary, excuse me, that should say 26. My apologies, I'll get that corrected. Fiscal year 26 projected budget, just over 196 million. Just like to mention always some of the premises that we were working around as we developed the budget. So all budget estimates are based around an enrollment estimate of 12,050 ADM. So again, if we flash back to that enrollment screen, we took a very conservative approach in terms of our enrollment projection. We lowered that from that 12,197 number down to 12,050, 146 ADM decrease from fiscal year of 2025. Obviously, we We believe we're going to bounce back at some point. We hope we're going to bounce back, but we're trying to take a conservative route and ensure our budget is set up for success. So we pulled that ADM number down. Again, major priority in this budget was continuing to address compensation, trying to make up ground in terms of current employee wages and placement schedules. And then, of course, being mindful of its impact to other funds and priorities of the district, again, primarily in that interaction between capital outlay and the general fund. Not a lot of open issues at this point. Negotiations were finalized. We were able to work all the increases into this budget. So we won't see any major increases in terms of settling negotiations or those things. Really just minor adjustments from the preliminary to the final. And we'll talk more about that from fund to fund. Okay, now it's the segue into the general fund revenue side of things. So we're going to take a look at the three major funds: general fund, capital outlay, and special education, and highlight some things both on the revenue and expenditure side. So this really goes back to a lot of what you were discussing, Katie. And there's a concept in this revenue side that I need to explain up front that applies to both revenue and expenditure. So the state requires that we report in our annual report that we pull all of our federal programs into the general fund and report them to the state in the annual report in the general fund. So right now we have all of our federal programs housed inside of the general fund. That gets really confusing when you're trying to really understand what's happening to the general fund from a foundational basis, from a year-to-year perspective. And so understand that oftentimes, I believe you all have heard me talk about this before, I will talk about pulling all of those programs out and away from the general fund so that we can see what's happening to the general fund at a foundational basis. The federal programs are essentially standalone programs. So they're going to support their own expenditures. They're going to not need assistance from the general fund. So it's not that it's not important what's happening to them. However, if they have an increase, if they have a decrease, that's all contained within that program. So overall, it has no impact on the general fund in terms of what the actual financial state of that is. So here's a great example of that. If you look at total revenue of the general fund, it's at just over 103 million. That looks like on its surface a 6% decrease in revenue. However, a lot of that is due to what's happening with those federal programs in terms of comparing them, our estimated allocations to what is actually in the budget in the current year. So the vast majority of that movement is wrapped up in those federal programs. As we pull that back and we look at our regular ongoing revenue sources, first of all, state aid, for example, we're projecting state aid at 35.6 million. That's a decrease of about 2.3 million, or about 6%. And again, that's based primarily on those two criteria that we discussed earlier, where we have enrollment going downward, property tax going upward, which ultimately pushes that total state aid amount downward. On the property tax side, we're projecting $52.9 million, which is an increase of about 786,000, or about 1.51%. So again, property tax increasing, which leads to part of the issue here. When we back all the federal programs out and we look at the regular ongoing revenue sources for the general fund, overall, it looks basically flat. We have a decrease of 601,000, or 0.32%. So back to the points you made earlier, Katie, which were correct points. Even though we're seeing increases in property valuation, even though our local taxpayers are feeling more of a burden, we're not seeing new revenue. Our revenue sources going into next year are essentially flat on the general fund side. I'll pause quickly.
The way that would change is if our enrollment went up.
Correct. That is the governor in the state aid mechanism. Significant increase to enrollment, target teacher salary of the state aid formula are really the two mechanisms. More than anything else, enrollment. Here's a breakdown of general fund revenue by source. Again, this really depicts the concept that we've been talking about. Local sources here in the blue make up 54.2 million, or about 53% of overall general fund revenue. When I came into the district, that split was about a 40-40 split. So we've seen that, again, increase, local taxpayers taking a larger portion of the overall expense. State aid taking a smaller portion. State aid in the gray, that's an incorrect number. I have to fix that too. 35 million, about 37% of the overall revenue. Federal here in the yellow makes up about 9%, and then some county sources at 1%. So overall, we're seeing that trend continue. The blue portion of that pie continues to get bigger and bigger. On the expenditure side, total expenditures projected at 105.9 million. Overall decrease of 4.2 million. Again, very deceiving. The majority of that movement is in the federal programs. When we pull that back and we look at regular general fund expenditures, we see an overall increase of about 662,000. Salaries make up the vast majority of that. They increase approximately 562,000. I didn't include this in the slide. We did see significant budget reduction in some of the other areas of the budget. We were able to pull back almost $1 million worth of expenditures. And again, what that helps us to do is make space for the increasing costs around salary and benefits. Has less of an impact than on the general fund. So we did some good budget work, I think, throughout this time period, and we'll continue to look at that between prelim and final. But overall, this leads to a deficit in the general fund of about 2.8 million. That sounds like a really large number, but again, in the overall aspect of 106 million, it's approximately 2.6%. There's several aspects in terms of budget management that play into this deficit management picture. However, I think we did a deep dive on this a couple months ago. To me, the sweet spot is trying to keep that deficit somewhere around the 3% range. And if we can do that, then we are always in a position where we have multiple options in terms of how we manage that. So for example, because of unused expenditures over the last several years, our fund balance has increased in the general fund, and you'll see that here in a few slides. So what we now have the ability to do is, if we actually enter into a deficit, because that's deficit management 101, are you actually going to enter a deficit? Over the past several years, we've been running about 96 to 97% of overall expenditure usage. Again, in the scope of 105 or 110 million dollars, that sounds like a very minimal amount of unused expenditures, but it can be several millions of dollars every year, depending on where you're landing. So obviously that makes cash balance grow. So now we have the ability to, if we enter into a deficit, cover that through fund balance, because we have excess cash above and beyond what we require for fund balance set aside, and not have to rely on capital outlay. So we'll cover that deficit if we ever enter a deficit through the fund balance cash and not through a capital outlay transfer. So we're not impacting any other funds. Couple of breakdowns of what the expenses look like. The large blue portion is salaries. The orange portion is benefits. So you can see about 83% of the overall expenditures are made up of salary and benefits. Purchase services making up about another 10%, and then supplies, property liability insurance, and equipment making up the remainder of that. So very common for a general fund budget. About 83 to 85% of that made up of salary and benefits. If we look at that by function, we see about 53% being instructional, about another 48% being support service expenditures, And then the remainder are community services and extracurricular. So very common breakdown of what that typically looks like. So in summary, in terms of the general fund, regular revenue sources are essentially flat. State aid, significant reduction, again, due to that enrollment decline. Enrollment's going to be crucial. It's always crucial. Every single year it's crucial, even more in this time frame. Really keeping an eye on enrollment and what's happening is going to be a big deal. I think it's easy to look at that budget and be critical. However, there's some great things that happened within that general fund budget. As we move into next year, we increased salaries across the board for current employees. We increased placement grids. We found reductions in several areas to offset a significant portion of the increase from salaries. And ultimately, the fund doesn't have to lean on other funds for support. So I think it's easy sometimes to get stuck in the negative aspects of what's happening, especially when we're up against some tough factors like we were this year. But there's some great things happening within that general fund budget as well. I'm gonna move quick on to capital outlay. So capital outlay, much simpler fund. Total revenue projected at 32.6 million. Nothing weird about this fund as we move into this year. You know, we've had South Middle School, we've had refinancing of capital outlay certificates in the past several years. This is a year where it looks very normal in capital outlay at this point. Property tax makes up 98% of total regular capital outlay revenue. So about 32, again, the entire amount is what we're projecting. Increase of 3.1 million or 10.8%. Again, the primary thing to understand here is if we flash all the way back to that valuation screen, in this particular tax year, we saw much more growth in new valuations than we did in existing. That's good for the capital outlay formula, which is why we see such a significant revenue increase from a year-to-year perspective. So revenue, that's revenue on the capital outlay side. On the expenditure side, projecting 25.4 million. Again, the decrease that you see from a year-to-year perspective is not ESSER. Gosh, I'm sorry, I got a lot of mistakes in here. South Middle School funds falling off. So project is wrapped, all those funds go away, which is why we see the major difference. Again, this is a project-based fund, very different from the general fund, which is more of an operational fund. So every year can look a little different. The total overall requests in the system were a little lighter this year, which is why we see the difference between revenue and expenditures. I think one of the major highlights, we're putting about $8 million into facility projects. I sent 2 attachments yesterday, one of which was a categorical breakdown of capital outlay expenses, and the other was the list of capital outlay projects that we're targeting for next year. Again, I think one of the things I really want to highlight is trying to really pull all those arrows in the same direction and strategically plan how we are approaching the capital outlay budgeting process. Aligning the strategic plan, aligning how we're selecting facility projects, aligning ultimately how we're investing in facilities is very, very important. And I think this year really highlights the good work that Jade and John, the facilities committee, and everyone has done in trying to pull all those arrows together. We also have a resolution that we're working on. I've worked a lot with the finance committee. We talked a lot about strategic capital outlay budgeting. That's really how this budget was shaped. I was hoping to have it up and ready to go, but we certainly will bring that to the board, the full board, prior to the final budget, so you can see the resolution and you can see how we shape this budget. But I feel like that's been a really good work in progress. The only note here is, as you're all aware, we RFP'd for the Rapid Valley expansion project. As we're working on that, we will then include that into the final budget when we get to that point. So we'll likely see expenditures increase when we get to a point where we have a good feeling about what that project is going to look like.
Coy?
Yes, sir.
I think if you go back another slide, forward one. Yes. I think something that, again, needs to be highlighted that kind of slides by is the $8 million that the district is going to spend on facilities. And one of the things that the Finance Committee has asked of you is, in our desire to ask for a bond, people assume that we aren't doing anything to our facilities with the money that we already have.
Right.
And so the report that you will give us will be an answer to that question. Well, what are you doing? Are you not doing nothing? You just want more of my money?
Yeah.
And we will be able to prove, and it happens year over year, and maybe we need to do a better job, as I'm doing now of highlighting the fact that every year we spend this type of money in upgrading and improving and maintenance to our facilities. So it's not, we just wait from bond to bond to ask the community for money for our facilities. We do something every year to upgrade, improve, and repair our facilities.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent point, sir. Thank you. I think that's one of the really misleading aspects of that overall conversation, is that the district has not invested in its facilities. And as you'll see when I bring that report forward, which I will here in the next meeting or two, I think nothing could be further from the truth. And technically, it is the other way around. I think the district has invested over the course of time a significant amount of its overall capital outlay budget into its facilities. And obviously that's a really complicated picture, and something that we need to talk a lot about. But you're 100% correct. I believe that people will be shocked when they see the amount of money that's been invested in the facilities over the years. And really helps to tell the story of how this facility situation got to the point it's at. But
Ms. Clapham.
It's really just to piggyback on what you're saying, because I was gonna wait till it came up in the agenda, but since we were talking about it, and that's a perfect example. I think obviously we look at agendas, but today when we're approving the change orders for, I mean, we're talking about over $1 million being invested in Central High School, and we're talking about furniture, flooring. And I think part of it is, like not understanding how much in a school that size, how much that costs. But I was gonna bring it up. We have two projects that we're approving today, and those two projects combined are almost $1.5 million. So we are doing, people don't necessarily see it, but we are doing all the time. And I think sometimes it's that, just like in your home, when you spend $1,000 on or $5,000 on a furnace, the outside of your house doesn't look any different, but you have to have it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, our infrastructure is aging. And so a lot of the things that we have to do are not visible. He'll say, well, we haven't, this looks old, this sign looks old, but it's not a boiler, it's not asbestos abatement, things that are necessary, but aren't necessarily aesthetically pleasing. And that's another thing I think that's difficult for the community, because they don't see it.
Right.
It's not visibly obvious, but it's happening all the time.
Right. It's a great point. Categorical breakdown of capital outlay expenditures. Again, you got a couple more in-depth reports, but purchase services in the blue making up 10 million, supplies and equipment in the orange making up 5.5, debt service in the yellow at 6.4, and then capital acquisitions in the gray at 2.9. You have more in-depth information in your packets. But overall, capital outlay is in a great place. Major revenue source of property taxes continues to show strong increases. Community continues to grow, which obviously benefits the district revenue, especially when it's new growth on the capital outlay side. This was a particularly favorable year with a $7 million surplus. However, that will likely be contributed to the Rapid Valley expansion project when we get that up and moving, which is great. The early estimates of that project were between the $12 and $13 million range. And so we have 60% of that paid before we even touch capital outlay cash, which is a great thing. So again, I think really trying to pull all those arrows in the same direction, be strategic about how we approach capital outlay is working well in this sense. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I think executing on the strategic plan by continuing to find ways that we can push additional resources to the district facilities is work that in particular I'm really proud of in this budget. Okay, lastly, special education. I don't frankly even know where to begin to discuss special education this year. You know, we deep dove into that a couple meetings ago. It's really complex, really difficult to understand. So as we look at the revenue side of capital outlay, special education, we're projecting 24.5 million. The story here really is around state aid. Right now, we're projecting $0 in state aid to special education. And if you recall, the issue that we have is what we call an excess fund balance issue. So we have sort of this perfect storm of variables that are happening: increased property tax revenue, decreasing enrollment, underutilization of expenditures, all leading to ultimately a fund balance buildup. We've now hit a point where essentially, because of the amount of fund balance that we have, we're projecting that we won't receive any state aid at this point. Of course, as we spend that fund balance down, which is the plan, as you're going to see here momentarily, state aid will start to incrementally return as fund balance comes down. So as we look at the expenditure side, we're projecting 31.2 million, which is an increase of $2.3 million, or about 8%. That's entirely in salary and benefits. Every other category was either static and or fell. Of course, as you're all aware from sitting in negotiations conversation, we took a very aggressive approach to salary and benefits on the special education side. Significant increases to teachers, paras, and some of those categorical special education employees. The good news is we were really accurate in terms of our negotiation estimates. We came very, very close to where we were projecting. And so ultimately, this is not an unexpected place for us to be. I do think it's really important to note that we have this very difficult balancing act happening right now of trying to address that excess fund balance issue, trying to pull that cash balance down, but not getting the fund to a spot where we've overcorrected and then eventually would need help from the general fund and or capital outlay to get the fund back on track. So if the district received the full amount of special education state aid that it would be due in fiscal year 2026 based on enrollment, based on the special ed state aid allocation, we would receive about $6.5 million. So essentially, when we look at the deficit happening in special education, if we receive that full amount, the fund would be balanced. And I think that's a really important note and something that we need to continue to focus on in the future is looking at a total revenue picture if we were receiving all our revenue and ensuring that that fund stays balanced and that we're not letting it get overcorrected into a point where it's in a true deficit. What will happen in this year, hypothetically, is as we spend that down and we dig into that fund balance cash, it will start to lower that fund balance. And ultimately, again, state aid will incrementally start to come back. Here's a look at the special education expenditures. Categorically, again, this fund is even heavier in terms of compensation. Salary and benefits here in the blue and orange make up about 93% of the overall budget. The remainder being supplies and purchase services. So really personnel heavy budget. In summary, state aid, again, is the major component to watch in terms of SPED and how we're moving into the future. We did do some great things in terms of compensation, had significant compensation increases. Ultimately, we need to just ensure that that fund is in a good place as the spend down occurs and as we move into the future. Not a lot to highlight in the other funds. As you can see in that summary slide, student nutrition is showing a significant expenditure increase. I think that's indicative of the inflationary environment that we faced. That is a different fund. It's much more of a business fund where a higher percentage of its expenses are supplies and materials. Obviously, the inflationary environment has not been kind to that fund, and so that's really where the majority of that increase comes from. Health insurance fund, we did decrease expenditures a bit just based on the trend of spending, but obviously, as we'll hear from Mr. Arnett later, we'll adjust that as necessary between preliminary and final. Last couple slides, just very quickly looking at reserve balance projections. So as you can see here in the general fund side, the blue bar is the reserve that we set for ourselves of 12% of overall expenditures, which in this budget would be just over $12 million versus the, versus the targeted. So as you can see, our fund balance grew in those orange bars over the last several years. Even though we're in a deficit as we move into 26, a projected deficit, we'll still exceed our cash reserve target by several millions of dollars. So overall, fund is in a good place. On the capital outlay side, again, it's difficult to determine what the appropriate target is because it's a very different looking fund. We've typically set that at about 15 million reserve on hand, which is part of the budgeting resolution that we're going to talk more about. But at this point, overall reserve far exceeds what the target is. So capital outlay is in a great spot. SPED, this is really tricky in terms of the reserve projection on the SPED side. First of all, we have to talk current end of year projection for fiscal year 25. I'm projecting at this point, we're going to land in about the 86% expenditure utilization range. That would mean we were underspent in that fund by about $4.3 million. Our starting cash in that fund was 11 million. So we're probably going to finish somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million in cash in that fund. Again, that's not a good thing. That's not how we want to build fund balance, nor are we allowed, obviously, to build fund balance that way in the SPED fund. So as we project that out and we look at fiscal year 26 and about a $6.5 million deficit, projecting the ending cash is probably going to end somewhere in the 9 to 10 million range. Of course, that depends on the overall expenditure utilization. So in a good place, technically, it would be great to spend that down even faster so that we can have the state aid revenue source coming back in. But overall, the fund's in a good, safe place. Again, so overall summary district, I think is in a really strong position as we move into next fiscal year. Property valuation has increased tax revenue. Again, that's beating us up on the state aid side in both this general fund and the special education fund. I think the highlight is, again, the district invested significantly in employee compensation. That's been a major focus. We haven't solved all of our problems, but we continue to take forward steps, which is a great thing. And ultimately, not impacting any other funds, no flexibility transfer is going to be necessary. With that, President Carr, I will turn it over to the board for any questions or discussion.
All right. Thank you for that report. Very good. Board members, any comments or questions for Mr. Sassy? Okay. Oh, Mrs. Stephens.
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out to the rest of the board that when I see that capital outlay reserve and it's so high in my mind and in the finance committee, I've kind of been thinking about it as a building and land fund. And it's just a different way of thinking about it's a fair amount of cash and it's cash we need, but it's cash we don't want to use for our ongoing financial or facilities expenditures. That's what that $8 million is. So I wanted to say that to you all, but also just to the public that even though it looks like a lot of money, it's just planning for that master plan that we commissioned and that we plan to use over the next decade or so.
It's a great point. I think it highlights the idea of the tricky position that the district has been in over the last 50 years of trying to manage bonds versus regular capital outlay revenue, how you address facility issues, how you address preventative maintenance, how you address new building needs. It's a tricky situation. And we'll certainly deep dive into that as we bring the resolution forward and talk more about some of the elements of that and how we see the district strategically moving into the future around the capital outlay and facility side.
Yeah. And I think I want to highlight again, which was your last statement, when you look at our budget, and especially when I get emails and comments about salaries and compensation of the employees of the district, the reality of it is that in the general fund budget, we're spending 86% of that budget goes to human beings, right?
Yes, sir.
So when you're asking the board about, well, what else are you going to do? Then, I mean, I guess technically you could take it to 96%. But then what else are you going to be able to do? And so again, from a budgeting standpoint, it is factual evidence that the board and the district is doing the best that we can to compensate our employees. And when you look at the special education fund, when you say 90% of that budget goes to human beings, I mean, I don't know where you can factually go to talk about, we are doing at 90%. I don't know how anybody can have an argument that we're not doing the best that we can for the people that are working. So I think those are important facts to talk about when somebody asks what we're doing. What am I doing? I can ask them just to look at the budget and you can see what we're doing.
Certainly. Great points.
All right. Anything else? Moving right along.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right. You're welcome. At this point, we don't have any conflict of interest. On to item 10, Rapid City Area Schools Policy, Procedures, and Exhibits. This is our first reading. Is there any item that a board member would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for the Rapid City Area Schools Policies, Procedures, and Exhibits first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve and move on for the first reading, approve the first reading of the Rapid City Area Schools Policy, Procedures, and Exhibits. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, motion carries. Item 11, approval of proposed agreement. Any agreement item a board member would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreements.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed agreements. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. Item 12, approval of the proposed consent agenda. Any item a board member would like to pull for discussion? Mrs. Stephenson.
Yeah, I'd like to pull B, please.
Okay, any other line item? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda except for B. I will entertain a motion for that. Is that what I said?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed consent agenda except for item B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion for 12B, behavioral reset.
I'll motion.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion?
Yes. I pulled this only because I just think it's important. It's new to our district. I wanted to point out and highlight that this is a response to what the board has heard from staff and what the board has heard from families. And I'm very appreciative that this is an effort that Dr. Strasser undertook with Dr. Comer and many other staff members I know. And I want to just offer my gratitude and point out to the community that this is good. This is our taking steps to treat our students or to give them the best possible services that they can get.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the behavior reset signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. Item 13, items for board action.
Those are single votes on each item, President Carr.
Well, technically not if it's not, we can vote on both of them if we're voting on item 13. The other way you could do it, we can vote on 13A and 13B, which I'm gonna take them. Board member have any suggestion or any issue of taking them together, or would you like to take them separately?
13A and B.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so we will take. Oh, I kind of see what you're saying, though.
I motion to approve 13A.
Together now.
That just feels cleaner.
Yeah.
It's not gonna
okay,
take that long with two of
agree.
them.
My apologies to the almighty wise Shirley. I should not have questioned her authority and her original opinion. I am so sorry. All right, you're right. It does make it cleaner and clearer of what we're doing. All right, so we have a motion to approve 13A. We need a second.
Motion. Second.
Second.
Sorry.
Okay, it has been motioned and seconded to approve the 25-26 proposed budget. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of approving the 25-26 proposed budget signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. All right, I will entertain a motion on 13B, the RFP for the West Fifth Street property.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for us to approve the RFP West Fifth Street property. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. All right, item 14, items for board information. We have our, is it annual or twice a year do we get our?
I think it's
Biannual is what you would say?
semi-annual sounds right.
Semi-annual, okay. Brown and Brown insurance presentation.
There we go. All right, good evening, board members.
Good evening.
All right, thank you for allowing me to join you today to give you the, what do we come up, semi-annual? Is that what we came up with? All right, so just like we have done in previous years, I'll make this short. This is our initial meeting with you all. We had a great meeting today with the insurance committee to provide an update of how your health insurance plan and other plans are working and to give a quick initial update to what the renewal will look like. So the slide deck I know was sent to you ahead of time. I'm just going to head up a few slides. I'm not going to go through the renewal recap. You all know where you stand as far as benefits. I'll just note that really this year, the main two plans that are up for renewal are your medical and prescription drug plan with Wellmark, as well as the specific stop loss insurance, and your dental plan with Delta Dental of South Dakota. All other plans, your vision plan, what we call your ancillary, your lives, Your voluntary benefits are in a rate guarantee, so there are no changes to the plans or the rates for the upcoming 2025-2026 plan year. Just want to give you a quick update on how the plan is running. In this column here, this light blue over here, the left on your screen, we're looking at how the plan's running contractual, not to what you budget, but to the contractual rates to Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. So from September through March, the first 7 months, you've had $10.8 million in claims, both medical and prescription. You've had $285,000 in claims already over your specific stop loss level. That's your reinsurance, which is currently at $175,000. So any amount over that per member is not paid by the district. So total claims subject to contractual maximums that are in an expected, $10.58 million. To contractual expected, it's about 6% higher than Wellmark expected. They're running a little bit hotter through the first 7 months of the plan. Last year, at this exact same time frame, you're about 2.3% higher. You ended right at 100%, 99. The year prior, you did end up at a contractual expected 100%. Again, just want to note, this is not what you're budgeted to. This is what you're contractually obligated to Wellmark. So I'll show you that here in a second. Enrollment is pretty flat, but I'll show you here more on this page. If we break out month by month claims, I like to look at the averages down here. Left side, light blue is your 23-24 full plan year. Dark blue is your 24-25. You know, last year, if I look at your total net claims, you average about 1.35 million per month. You're up about 1.52 million per month this year. And if you notice, after the first month of your plan, September, October through February ran much higher than typically does plan year over plan year. It has come back down, so we'll see how the next couple months play out, but definitely higher. And with just a small dip in enrollment, we're going to see your per employee per month claims up a little bit, and that's over here, 12.5%. Now, I will note too, although the enrollment is somewhat flat, you do have more employee-only contracts in this plan year, but you have fewer employee plus one and family contracts, which means there is going to be less premium coming into the plan, smaller size contracts, okay? So that's going to drive a little bit of the numbers we're going to see here at the end of the report. Just real quick, where are those services being held? You know, last year, 35% of your total claims were in professional services, your office visits, facilities, your hospital, inpatient, outpatient, your highest claim areas, 28.6%, but pharmacy, 36.4%. Last year, your pharmacy was 36% of your total spend, which is a little higher than we see on average for school districts. So that is something we are going to keep diving into. We did add this plan year, the Prudent RX plan, which takes those specialty medications, deeper discounts to the plan and to the members. It actually provides a $0 copay for employees that actually go on the Prudent RX plan for specialty medications, but provides savings, and I'll show you that later to the plan as well. Okay. Real quick, I just want to show you what Wellmark, I call it the machine, is doing for you. So through March, September through March, $25 million, $25.1 million has been submitted to Wellmark for claims. Before it even touches the RCAS plan, 49% of that is taken off through provider discounts. Wellmark's doing their job, and that's a great number for an area such as Rapid City. When we see any provider discounts, the 45 plus, you're getting good discounts. The majority of those higher discounts are going to be on inpatient hospitals. Those are your highest claims. And it is up there, 9.2 million in billed charges, but it's not obscene. So you're getting a real good discount from Wellmark, coordination of benefits, specific stop loss violations. So before those claims even hit your plan, 25 million, 12 million's taken off. All right. That leaves it to go to the employees. So coinsurance, copays, deductibles. We talk about this. I have one more slide. Your plan is somewhat employee friendly. They're currently through March, about 12.4% of cost is coming from employees out of deductibles, coinsurance, and copays. 17% is typically average, so anything lower than that is a slightly richer plan for the employees. So that's a good signal, and I'll show you on the next slide as well. But of that 25 million that was presented, the plan paid 10.58 million of that. We call that an efficiency of 42.2%, or in other words, the plan is paying 42 cents on each dollar submitted. We target 47 to be a good plan. You're below that, which is fantastic. It's running well. High claimants, again, just looking at, this isn't high utilization. These are just your high claimants. When we talk with the committee, we work with HR, we work with Rapid City, we talk about what drives cost, and it's high claims. It's utilization, it's pharmaceuticals, and high claimants. We track everything over 100,000. Your specific stop loss level, your reinsurance is 175, okay? So these 15 individuals, here's 15 members, drive 26% of your plan cost. And I'll show you that a little bit more when we get to the renewal. The member burden, I think it's important to know what your constituents, what your members are actually paying out of pocket. So now we're talking plan design and premiums. 13.549 million, September through March. Employees have kicked in their share of the medical claims, their share of the pharmacy, but then they pay you contributions, right? So of that 13.549, they're picking up 36% September through March. That leaves 64% to the district. There's one really gold standard on benchmarking here, and that's Milliman. 58% employer, 42% employee. So through March, RCS is picking up 64%. The members are 36. Again, showing that favorability to the member. Now, this will change as the plan year moves on. Last year, you ended at 61% RCAS, 39% employee. Again, above the benchmark. Dental's running really well on a per employee per month basis. It's about a 7.5% decrease. Now we will see ebbs and flows, and it just happens that dental plans run with school calendars. Preschool or prior to school starting, we see those claims go up. End of the calendar year, we see it go up, and in between we see them dip. So we'll see some ebb and flow here as well, but it's running very well. And then what I do want to show is where you're running from a funding summary. If we look at the light blue, I'm going to highlight just the year to date. So in contributions, the district, between the staff, between retirees, has taken about $11.3 million in. To contractual, that's about 99.8% to contractual. We look at those fixed costs, admin, stop loss, Wellmark's cost, 1.4 million. There's those net paid claims. RX rebates, I do want to spend one quick second on that. So Wellmark is a great partner, and then they provide 100% of RX rebates back to you. What that is manufacturers on certain medications, usually your higher cost specialty medications, have rebates. They provide those back to the carriers. 100% of those flow back to the RCS plan. You can see last year, RCS took in just over $2 million in RX rebates. Now last year was odd, it had 5 rebates. Normally they're quarterly. But the way the calendar worked, you had 5, so it's a little higher. You can see in the previous years, 1.5, 1.6. However, we're projecting about a 1.9 million in RX rebates this year. That's on top of the new Prudent RX program, where you're not going to get rebates from Prudent RX, you're getting lower drug costs. So that's going to show up in the net paid claims. Okay, so when we look at that intake of 11.3 million, output of 11 million, currently you're about 97.2% to budget. We're projecting about a 99.5. Now, one thing to know when we look down here, we break that down to a per employee per month cost. And so if we annualize the first 7 months for the last 5, so a full 12 months, we're thinking about $18 million in plan expenses. Your employee contributions, as I noted earlier, a little less in contributions because we have a few less contracts, and we have less higher premium contracts, employee plus one and families. So 12.5 million, but 18 million, we take away the contributions. That leaves the cost of the district about 12.5 million. 880.32 per employee per month, or up 18.8%. But what's important to know is look at last year, you were down 2%. The year prior, you were down 3.6. So that 18.8 for the first 7 months, which we just showed, a few of those months were higher than average utilization, are coming on the heels of 2 very favorable years. If you actually go back to 2021, 2022, and we look at the total plan expenses of 18 million, we're really right back there. We're riding a little bit of a roller coaster with the claims, but that's when we go up and see where we're actually at funding. And that's what, working with the committee, giving them the data, they make great plan design decisions to, although those claims are fluctuating, your contributions, your budget is not. It's staying pretty level. Okay. All right. I want to jump into the renewal real quick. This is just a very preliminary renewal. This is your plan design. One thing I think it's always important to show, the committee got a few more slides on this, but where you're benchmarked. So when we benchmarked you down here at the bottom, we looked at elementary and secondary schools, Midwest, upper Midwest, 500 plus employees. When I look at just your medical plan, on this chart here, medical plan design here, employee cost sharing here, you're right dead in the middle of the average zone. Anywhere in that gray is going to be market competitive. You're smack dab in the middle, both on contributions and plan design. Now, one slide not in this deck that I showed the committee is when we put your whole portfolio, your medical would be this axis would be all of your other plan designs. Rapid City is actually a market leading in the 60th to 80th percentile. It's a fantastic portfolio of plans compared to the benchmark, okay? But sticking with medical, initial, it's about a 7.7% increase as of today. Now, again, you saw the data we have, the first 7 months aren't running that well. Now, we're not going to focus so much on this plan year because it's immature. We're going to look at your past plan years and blend. We have a couple more months. Where it stands right now, your stop loss premium is going up 11.5%. Now, that's fantastic. One thing I talked about with the committee today is what's called leverage trend. Leverage trend on a $175,000 specific deductible is going to be in the 21 to 25% range. Wellmark's passing along at 11.5. It's a great renewal on the stop loss. And as you see over here, stop loss accounts for about 8.8% of your total cost. Your costs come in claims. Their admin fees are going up 3.7. So for a total fixed of 9%, they're expecting a 7.5% increase in claims. That's both utilization, that's trend, that's inflation. So you blend that to a 7.7%. As we do every year with the district, initially, we look at where you're funding to contractual expected. It's 94.8%. We put you at the same area. So for that 7.7% increase. When we stood here last year at the same time, it was right at 7%. Now the hope is to do what we did last year and come back in a couple of months and have that dropped a little bit. We dropped last year from a 7 down to a 5.7. We'll see how the next few months of claims go. We did market to Health Partners, being that Health Partners has become more of a competitor in Rapid City. Unfortunately, they declined to quote. They said we're going to be 20+% increase, so we're not going to provide a proposal. So not a lot of market leverage. That also shows you the market is looking at your plan with a little more tepid responses in previous years. So you're running less than a trend increase. A trend right now is about 8.5%. You're running about a 7.7. That's our baseline. That's where we'll start. Yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying?
Please.
So 2 questions. One, so you're saying it's been asked and I've wondered, like, well, have we looked at other options? So what I'm hearing you say is we did, and they wouldn't even give us a quote because they knew they were significantly higher than what we currently do.
Correct. And last year when we looked at them, remember we came at a 7, Health Partners at an 11. A few years ago, Health Partners, again, they're getting bigger in this area, open access. They have the partnership with Monument Health. They were really competitive, but never enough to really overtake Wellmark that discounts the rates. But the last couple of years, they've looked at your plan and really have taken a step back. And yeah, this year they said, we're not going to give you a number. It's coming in 20% over. So we're going to decline to quote.
And then my other question is, so when we look at, we're talking about percent changes and, you said we're at 7.7, it'll probably be 5. Is that basically directly related to, you're saying our claims this year are higher. So it's like we're seeing increased usage. And so that is directly related to that increase. Yeah,
there's a couple things. And this exact same question was asked at the committee. Is a couple levers there, right? First of all, just medical trend and inflation by itself is driving costs. Right. So when I talk about medical trend, it's the cost of Band-Aids today to Band-Aids tomorrow. It's about an 8.5% right now. You can say it's between 7 and 9, but in the area in upper Midwest, it's about 8.5%. So right now, usually when we see a plan, now you're self-funded, we underwrite you. But when we see a plan running over 100% loss ratio, which you're at 106 today, we would expect a trend increase plus some. You're getting a little bit less than a trend increase out the gate, that 7.5. That's just on claims, just talking about claims by itself, right? So part of that's inflation, part of that's just medical trend. And the other part is what you had mentioned too. We have a little bit lower or a little bit less population, not much, a little bit less. So little smaller risk pool, but the claims this year have been much higher than in years past. So you culminate those levers, it's going to add additional cost to that risk pool. Now, again, that last month that we have, March, came down significantly in claims, more in line what it ran with the past years at this time. We'll have to see how April and May come in. And then we'll see how that plays. Because one thing we want to do, and that's why I showed on that medical summary, claims are going to fluctuate. They're going to roller coaster. Our job is to make sure to underwrite you so you're able to absorb those increases. And when those decreases are there, in fact, the last 2 years when you had negatives, we didn't provide a renewal that says, oh, you had 2 great years, we're going to drop rates. No, they were great years, but X should have happened. And that's where we're going to rate you at. Carriers kind of look at it a little differently. They look at more in silos. We look at your last couple of years together. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Great. Just real quick, if this is our starting point, we pass along that 7.7, right? Our goal is to get lower than that. But if we were to pass that along, here's your 12-month employees, singles, single plus one, families. I'm just going to pick on the families real quick. The singles, $122.59 per month they're paying today. A 7.7% increase would be $132.05. Or if you go way over here, it's a $946 per month increase to the employee. You can see the plus one, you can see the families. These are your 9-month employees, same way. And these are your spouse in the district. Now we talked about that. It's also a very, very generous benefit for those spouses that work together in the district. They're getting an extremely good benefit by only paying the cost of 2 times a single or 2 times a family. They're not paying the plus one rate or the family rate. So this would be their rates here, going from a $245.18, for example, to $264.10, $18.92 per month for a 2-person contract. Okay. If we were to roll that up, everything's going to stay the same every month, which it won't, but we have to go apples to apples. Same tier, same 9 months, 12 months, all of that. You can see here that the projection is that 7.7 going from 18,185 to 19,589. The district picking up 7.7%, so it's just over $1 million. Okay. That's the medical. Just quickly, your dental, we are projecting probably a 3% increase, a little below trend. The medical is running well, but the funding is a little bit below. So there's a little bit of loss year over year with the district. It's about a 3% increase. And you can see that that would go anywhere from a 12 cent up to $1.54. Vision is rate locked. So there are no changes to the employees there. What I call your ancillaries, your basic life, dependent life, retiree life, no rate change. The only thing that would change the rates would be the volume. Obviously, if you have different enrollments, but there is no change in the cost per thousands. The voluntary benefits to your employees, there are no rate changes. So if we wrap all of that up, I'm going to focus on the bottom here. Looking at your portfolio, like I mentioned, Benchmark is a market leading portfolio. Current medical, current dental, current vision, employer paid life and AD&D, and the flexible spending on the district cost today, projecting about a 14.145 million all in. 25, 2026, 15.180 or a 7.32. So as it stands today, your entire portfolio would be receiving less than a medical trend benefit, which I think is a really good starting point. I've had some great discussions with the insurance committee on things to look at within the plan to see where there's opportunity for cost savings, but also keeping the plan being fiduciaries to the entire plan, not just one segment of them. And then that's what we'll go, the next meeting, we'll bring out some alternates, hopefully some revised renewals here as well. Any questions?
Ms. Clappin.
So this may be for Coy, I'm not sure. So if we look at in theory, I said, we're hoping the 7.3% goes down, but it may
Yes.
not. How do we as a district, and I use that we very loosely because you're the numbers guy, not me. But how do we as the district then determine what part the district absorbs and what part staff absorbs?
It's a really great question. So I think back to Sean's slides around that benchmark area. So as you're all aware from sitting in negotiations discussions, we've approached that a little differently in this district than probably a lot of districts. What we've always tried to maintain is that we are going to continue to meet that benchmark that we've been at historically of 64% split, a split of 64% district premiums and 34% passed on to the employee. Again, in my opinion, that is a much more effective way to manage that situation than opening that up every single year by group to discuss how it changes and moves and looks different. really easy to develop inequities, really easy to get way off base in terms of what you're contributing by group, et cetera. So essentially what happens in this situation, and I think it, in a lot of ways, encourages both parties, the district and the employee, to understand that what's good for one is good for both. Because essentially what we have happening is we're going to maintain that split, and whatever that increase is that comes out of that split is what each side absorbs, so to speak. So for example, I believe last year we ended at around 5.7%. All in, that was an additional about 1.25 million additional dollars to the district in terms of covering the premium in that amount. So we will again maintain that split. That is our agreement with the groups that we're going to maintain the current ratio split. However, that's a significant increase to the district, and I think again sometimes that's an aspect because of how we handle it that tends to get overlooked both in negotiations, conversations, and then in discussions like this, because that's a big deal. The district is spending upwards of $10 million per year providing employee benefits in terms of the premiums that we're contributing. So it's a significant investment. I think Sean does a great job of laying that out. What I really want to emphasize is the idea. Again, I think sometimes we get very narrow vision, tunnel vision into thinking about some of the negative aspects. I think when you hear Sean talk about what the industry standard is and what the district is providing versus the industry standard, we're ahead of where other districts are at. And I think that often shows in the feedback that we get, but it's expensive and it costs money to get to that point. And so back to President Carr's comments around, that total makeup of expenditures and what that looks like, this plays right into that overall aspect. And so, if hopefully we can get that down a couple percentage points, we can get it in the 5 to 6 range again. But it's essentially, we earmark about $1 million every year in additional premium contributions. So hopefully I didn't go on too big of a tangent, and that helps to explain.
No, that was very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Berkeley.
Thank you. As President Carr was saying earlier, I think that's something that we need to say more is if you're paying 5% more, we are also paying 5% more. It's not that we're just shoving off this cost onto the employee. We're actually taking on a little bit more than 5% because we're paying that higher percentage. And related to that, I had a question on that split. Is that just premiums? Is that premiums and deductibles and all of that? How is that 61% or 64%, I guess is your number?
So
what does that include?
This here is just on the screen is just premium.
Okay.
Yep. So that's just this. Now keep in mind, being you're self-funded, right? The district really isn't, you're budgeting it, but you're not stocking away that money in a mattress. I don't know, maybe Koi is, I'm not sure. But for that rainy day. So it's a budget line item, but you're paying claims. So really your portion, the district's portion could be more than that if claims were in a bad year, let's say, right? Where the employee, the staff, they're paying that percentage of the budgeted rate. It's going to stay fixed until a following year.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's a great explanation. And to me, there are sort of two different aspects of this. There's the management of this plan, trying to understand what that breakdown is going to look like, how we make the plan better, how we pull costs back, all those things. And then there's the sort of cash management aspect of that, of how we're actually paying out claims and managing the health fund and those things. So the premiums are all getting dumped into a fund, right? And it's sitting in my office. I keep it in a bucket. Getting dumped into a fund. And ultimately, like you saw earlier, we're budgeting $19 or $20 million in total expenditures because you could have certainly the plan and the premiums sometimes don't match, right? There can be years where it goes way over, it goes way under, and so there's really two aspects of management: the management of the plan, the nuts and bolts, what Sean and Brown do for us, and then the actual management of the cash portion of that in processing claims and all those things. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I did have one other question. The employee plus spouse different. Is that typical? Is that something that we just do as a perk, or like where does that come?
So like I told the committee, I don't want to step on any sacred, area. It is unique. And one thing that I've learned in doing this 17 years, I used to be in HR, right? There's two sides we're talking about: finance and culture, recruitment, retention, right? And every plan's going to have their unique thing on what to do. I would say this is definitely a one, and I'll just say this really quickly, and this is something we talk about the committee just to make them aware. That's our job to do. Is when you have, let's just say, an employee plus spouse, because this also applies to the family, but employee plus spouse, those are two people. And it's very easy for someone to say, well, if it's two people, then they are equivalent to the cost of 2 times a single. Fortunately, it's not that way in insurance. With a 2-person contract, you can have the young newlyweds, that you're younger, but you can have the empty nesters, which are more expensive. So on average, and this is a very large average, a 2-person contract could be 3 to 7 times the cost of a single. So when a plan then says, well, we're only going to charge you the premium, right? The district's taking out a bigger portion of 2 people, you're taking in a lot less for that 2-person contract. For the family, you're doing the same thing. In essence, the kids are not being charged in a way because you're doing 2 times a single. So there is some money left out there, but then it comes down to, that's the finance side talking. Then there's the culture side talking too, right? How many people are we talking about? Is it providing a benefit to the district? And that's where you have to weigh it. To answer your question, it is pretty unique, and that doesn't make it good, bad, or indifferent. It's what works here if it's working here. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
My question.
Is that decided by the insurance committee or by negotiations?
That's a really great question. I think historically
Yeah.
that's been in place in the district for a number of years. We just talked about this earlier today, Sean and I. I could certainly speculate on why and why not. I mean, I think Sean makes a great point there. There's aspects of it on each side that you could say are positive. There's also aspects that you could say are negative. I think Sean and I talked about this afternoon. I think we, as a district, need to have some discussions around what our theoretical approach is to how we provide benefits. And I know that sounds really fluffy, but we have some pieces of our plans, such as that really don't make a lot of sense. I'm just going to be honest. That is a very unique thing. Sean said it very politely. And so I think we really need to think about this $10, $11 million of money every year that the district is investing into benefits. Are we using that as effectively as we possibly could? And a lot of that then leads back to, I think, a theoretical conversation around what is most important about our benefit plan, and how do we drive what's most important out to the employees. And so I know I'm getting away from your question, Christine. I promise I'm coming back to try to answer it. But I would say that was probably a district decision at some point along the road, that was a good way to turn the plan and provide another layer of option for employees. I think, to me, probably rooted in some type of recruitment, retention type of movement. But I think if we really dug into the numbers, that affects a pretty small percentage of people in our system. And so, again, to me, it goes back to a theoretical discussion of are we getting what we want out of our benefit package, and are we delivering value to our employees? So I think that's a place we need to go in as we move into the future.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Thank you very much. Very good presentation. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And putting together this report.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, committee reports. Mrs. Stephenson.
Yeah, I don't have too much to report. The finance committee, you just got a very good overview of what the finance committee has been up to, so I don't have much to say beyond that. I went again to Western Dakota Tech as an ex officio member there. That was just last Wednesday, a week ago tomorrow, and they were very excited about 3 great candidates as finalists for the president of Western Dakota Tech, and spoke about having a reception and inviting the school district, inviting our new superintendent, and using this as an opportunity to really strengthen the relationship between the district and Western Dakota Tech. Also, just for your information, they're starting a radiology technician program in the fall. So they have a new program opening up, and that's kind of exciting. They also won 5 national awards from the American Tech Ed Association. They swept the state, which I'm just gonna brag for them. I think that's really cool. They got 5, and the rest of the technical colleges didn't get any. So, last note, just for those of you who aren't in leadership, that is officially, that's a committee, and wanted you to know in April, in May, and probably in June, functionally, we've been meeting every other week. And so that's why you haven't been hearing quite as much from us. And I believe in June is just twice. So wanted to give you that update. And facilities, you all got the master plan. I've heard good feedback, and I suppose we'll be meeting next week to go over it a little bit more.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Stephenson? Mr. Berkeley?
Just a quick one. Instructional council met last night. It was a very quick meeting, but K-12 ELA is getting new curriculum. Next year, they'll be piloting the new curriculum. So they've chosen their 2 or 3, depending on the grade level, that they will be piloting next year. And for secondary, for whatever reason, they shared that this was the first time they've had a true curriculum in about 20 years. The copyright on their last textbook was 2003, they said. They've been getting books and stuff, but this is the first time they've had like a program in a while. They've just kind of been pulling everything together. So that was interesting for me. They seem pretty excited about it, and they will be piloting starting in the fall.
Okay. Mrs. Urban?
I don't have too much to add, but I was on the facilities. I think one of the things that we're probably going to talk about soon is what our summer looks like, because I think we are going to need to meet pretty routinely and more to talk about what's next with our master plan and how we're going to attack that. So, and then there was some conversation about boiler shutdown and chiller startup, because we've had some really hot days, and then it takes a while, right, to get those up. So then we get complaints about it's too hot or it's too cold. It sounds like it was too cold for a while, but things start to balance out. So that's just how those systems work. And portable air conditioners. I don't remember what we talked about with that, but it's on my agenda. But anyway, that's about it. And then the Central High School change order, which we saw tonight.
Okay. All right. I attended the Title VI PAC meeting. And two of the biggest things out of that meeting is tomorrow night, 5:30, they start setting up. The actual grant entry is 6 p.m. One of the great things is that they are estimating up to 10 students and sponsors that will be getting honored on that night. And so it's open to the public. It's at Stevens High School. Again, if you get there a little early, you get through parking and find your way through. I think it's an important, great ceremony and program for not only the district, but the students that will be being honored on that night. There was also a conversation about they had it year before last, but they didn't have 8th grade, 5th grade, what's the other, kindergarten graduation celebration. That's very important to that group. And again, they had it last year. They didn't have it this year, but are planning to organize to make sure they have it for those age groups. So that's coming to work. Also, there's conversations about the PAC having a bigger role in making suggestions and having conversations to our board. And so I welcome that, and so that will come in the future, that they will be more involved in kind of what we discuss and issues that we bring up, so. All right, any other committee reports? Seeing none, any other? Ms. Clapham?
I will be pretty brief. It's obviously the end of the year and Maycember is real for any parent or teacher or anyone involved in the district. But just a few honestly positive things. We just had our grad walks and I just think it's such an example of how our students support and encourage each other, and just some of the photos of the older siblings with their younger siblings. It's just a really cool thing to see, and to see that like our younger kids looking up to our older students. And I think it's a wonderful tradition. That same way, just, I think we talk so much about our community and how our community can support kids. And I was at the middle school city track meet, and I think that is one of the best environments. I will tell you, there can be a kid who is dead last in walking, or there can be a kid who ran a 5-minute mile in 6th grade and everybody is cheering for every single kid every time. It doesn't matter what school they go to, it doesn't matter what their name is, it doesn't matter what grade they're in. And it's just such a beautiful example of how we really can lift up our kids. And I just really encourage the community to use this example and say, you know, we as a community really can surround and lift up these kids, and it means a lot to them. I had kids who don't know that I know them, and at one point I had looked up from the track because they heard their name. And so that just, you know, it means a lot to them. And then I also wanted to say thank you so much to our staff. I think sometimes there's kind of the joke, nothing's happening in May, we're not learning anything. But truly all the things that staff does to make this part special, like kindergarten graduations don't just happen. Grad walks don't just happen. End of the year ice cream parties don't just happen. People are working hard, taking extra time, taking their own resources to make the end of the year really special for our students. And so I'm really appreciative of that. And finally, just one individual shout out to Ms. Dreyer, counselor at West. I was just so impressed. There were a couple of students. One student saw that their friend was not eating lunch and was really sad, and they did what we love our students to do and went to the counselor and said, I don't know if they're okay. And within an hour, she had that student in their office, contacting the parents saying, you know, perhaps something is going on. And it's, you know, they have 600 students for that kind of attention and care to be provided to our students is just huge. And so I wanted to say a huge thank you to her for her continued everyday investment in our students.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Stephenson.
Well, gosh, Jamie, you just said more articulately what I wanted to say, which is that I wanted to thank, as a parent, you really get the schools really shine. And I recognize that I only see right now a lot of Wilson and Stevens end of year activities, but I can't recommend enough an elementary school talent show. I will go every year, no matter if I have kids in elementary school or not. The breadth of the talent, you know, somebody was doing silks and somebody else was doing taekwondo. It was just really impressive. It looked like it was a lot of work to put together. And I would also say, I wanted to shout out the choir at Stevens. They did a Pops concert last night, and listening to those seniors thank their choir teachers and use words like, you saved me. I didn't know what I was doing and you saved me. Really hit home. Like, I know other teachers, it's not just the choir teachers at Stevens, but it really hit home how important that role is. And you're right, Jamie, they are working so hard this month. Like, it doesn't, the kids might say, you know, nothing's happening, but they're working hard. And so I'm just really appreciative. And I know that my kids' experience is not alone, or it's not unique in this district.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Urban.
So ditto to all of that. And I also wanted to just thank Dr. Strasser. I think this has been a challenging year, and we're at the end of the year, and I think I am so proud of what has been accomplished in this district, and you've led it, and I'm super grateful for you.
I had a goal this year of visiting all 23 lunchrooms, and yesterday was my last lunchroom at South Park, and I am so excited about the student nutrition program. I want to thank Krista for setting up the dates, and as I was debriefing with one of the staff, I realized that in all 23 visits, I had no complaints. all the, I don't know, I don't want to insult them, but we call them lunch ladies. I don't know if that's their official name, but everybody remembers the lunch lady. And looking back at all 23 buildings, no one complained to me about anything. Most of them said, I love my job, I love the kids. And then I realized that the student nutrition program touches almost 95% of every student every day. And it's such a unique position to have to actually see and talk and know all the students. And so that was exciting for me. Thank you for everyone that works in student nutrition. You are greatly appreciated. My goal next year is to visit our special ed classes, so get ready. I think that's, oh, and another thing at South Park, Mrs. Gross, in her first grade class, I was about to say growing chickens. No, they're hatching chickens. Real life, like what? Real life chickens? I mean, it's just, as she was telling me about, they have journals, and I wish I want to go to first grade next year and hatch me some chickens. So there are just some wonderful things, as you've heard, going on around our district, and we're so appreciative to those that are in charge of those different programs. So there you go. All right, anything else in other? Seeing that there are none, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session 1-25-2.1 and 2.3.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. All right, this time we'll take a 3-minute break. There will be no votes or decisions made during executive session. Thank you all for coming and for watching.